today, we're diving into the really tense history between Iran and the United States. We're going to look at 4 specific flashpoints that show this consistent pattern: Iran finding ways to directly challenge US power, and often in ways nobody saw coming. So let's get right into it. Okay, let's start with a really recent event. January 8th, 2020. Iran has just hammered a US airbase in Iraq with a ton of ballistic missiles. And the first message we hear from the White House, from President Trump at the time, was meant to calm everyone down. Just 3 words: all is well. But you know what was actually happening on the ground at Al-Asad airbase? Well, it was a completely different story. The gap between that official statement and the reality was huge. This attack was incredibly precise. It just leveled hangars, chewed up runways, and while thankfully no one was killed, we later found out that over 100 American soldiers were dealing with traumatic brain injuries. So why did this happen? What was the trigger? Well, this missile strike didn't just come out of nowhere. It was a direct and very swift response. Just 5 days before, a US drone strike had killed one of Iran's top military leaders, General Qasem Soleimani. Iran said they would get revenge, and this attack was them making good on that promise. A direct missile strike like that feels like a massive deal, a huge escalation. But here's the thing: it's actually just one piece of a much larger puzzle. To really get it, we need to rewind the clock, just 1 year before this. All right, so let's jump to our second case. It's June 2019. This time, the arena of conflict isn't a military base on the ground. Nope. It's way, way up in the sky, high above the Persian Gulf. And at the heart of this whole thing was a US Navy RQ-4 Global Hawk. Now, this is not your average hobby drone. This is a super sophisticated, multi-million-dollar piece of tech. It's designed to fly higher than a commercial jetliner at over 60,000 feet and just watch and listen for hours and hours. So the whole dispute boiled down to one simple question of geography. Where exactly was this drone when it got shot down? Iran swore it was 15 kilometers inside their airspace. The US was adamant it was over international waters. And to this day, who's right? Well, that really depends on who you ask. Now, you have to remember the bigger picture here. This wasn't just about a drone. This whole incident went down during a period of really intense economic warfare. The US had hit Iran with sanctions that basically brought their oil exports to a dead stop. So the tension was already through the roof. Okay, so we've got 2020, we've got 2019, but this pattern, this back and forth, goes way back. Let's rewind the clock again, this time all the way to the late 1980s, when these same tensions were playing out, not in the air, but on the open ocean. This brings us to our third story back in 1987. And this one's about something called a reflagged tanker, which was, let me tell you, a huge and very direct challenge to the US Navy right in the Persian Gulf. So you might be asking, why was the US Navy even so involved over there in the first place? It was all part of a huge mission called Operation Earnest Well. See, during the Iran-Iraq War, Iran was hitting Kuwaiti oil tankers. So to keep the global oil supply moving, the US Navy started this massive operation to personally escort the tankers through the Gulf. But then the US did something that just dramatically raised the stakes. They let the Kuwaiti tankers get reflagged, meaning they literally started flying the American flag. The message was crystal clear. If you attack one of these ships now, you're attacking the United States. And on October 16, 1987, Iran called that bluff. They fired a Chinese-made Silkworm missile, and it slammed right into the bridge of the MV Sea Isle City, a tanker flying that very American flag. The hit injured 18 crew members and, tragically, blinded the American captain for life. This was a direct strike on a US-protected vessel. And that brings us to our final story from 1988. And this one is the perfect example of what experts call asymmetric warfare. It's the story of a $500 naval mine going up against a $90 million warship. So how did they do it? The strategy was so simple, it was almost genius. Iran wasn't using fancy torpedoes. They were laying fields of old-school contact mines, but with a really clever twist. They used chains to make the mines float about 5 meters under the surface, totally invisible from a ship, but at the absolute perfect depth to hit the hull of a big Navy ship passing over. And so, on April 14, 1988, the USS Samuel B. Roberts, a state-of-the-art American warship, sailed right into one of these invisible minefields. Now just think about the math here for a second. The weapon that brought this incredibly advanced warship to a dead stop in the water cost maybe $500. And the thing it almost sank? A $90 million piece of cutting-edge American naval power. I mean, if you want a textbook definition of low-tech beating high-tech, this is it. And for that $500 investment, the damage was, well, it was catastrophic. The explosion tore a massive 21-foot hole in the side of the ship, flooded the engine room, and knocked out its turbines. The ship was almost lost completely. So, okay, we've jumped from an airbase in 2020 to a drone in 2019 to tankers and mines way back in the 80s. What does it all mean when you pull it together? What's the big picture here? Well, these aren't just random, disconnected flare-ups. What they show is a consistent playbook that's been running for decades. It's a pattern of Iran directly challenging the military and tech power of the US, often using these clever, asymmetric tactics to level a playing field that would otherwise be tilted against them. And that's what brings this whole story right up to the present day. When you see this historical playbook laid out from cheap mines to sophisticated missiles, it leaves us with one really critical question to think about. How does all this history continue to shape the red lines, the rules of engagement, and the strategic thinking for both sides, right now, today?